All right. What do you think when I say AI, artificial intelligence? What kind of feelings do you feel when I say that? Because I think for some of us, we could be really aware of AI and the technological advances that are happening there, and you're excited about the future. You could see the potential that's there. You could see how it's already changed a lot of aspects in your life and made it easier. Or perhaps you're like a lot of us, where you're a little bit not sure. You don't know what's going on. You're not up to speed with everything. You're hearing a whole lot of mixed bags of stuff. And so you're just thinking, I'm just going to hide a little bit, stick my head in the sand a little and just kind of not interact with it. I just want to stay away from it. This can't be good for humanity. Or perhaps you're a little bit in the middle of those two. You know, you use ChatGPT, you use AI in different ways, that maybe more ways than you realize. And you can see the benefits of it, but you're also a little cautious. Like, is this really good for the world and where we're going to end up in the future, particularly at how fast paced it all is? And so I got Stephen Driscoll to come on to the show and to talk about this. He's written this book called Made in Image. It was released late last year, and it's available on all your major Christian retailer books. But it's a really great book that helps you work through and think, okay, well, first off, he gives you a bit of a history, but then he goes into like, what's the future of AI looking like? And what are some of the things that we need to consider as Christians? How do we interact with this in a way that glorifies God? And how do we interact with each other and have conversations around this that continues to have the dignity of being image bearers of God, but also ensures that we are kind of aware of some of the problematic areas that we could face as AI grows. So I hope you really enjoy this episode. If you're new to Her Theology, thank you so much for joining. Make sure you leave a review, whatever platform you're listening to. Head to hertheology.com if you want to find out more about the vision and missions of Her Theology, and make sure you're following along on Instagram. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit subscribe. It is super helpful to help grow this ministry. And if you haven't been on YouTube, you can get all of Her Theology podcasts now on YouTube. So make sure you find me on there and follow along on there as well. Let's move on to the show. I hope you have a great time listening to this. And if you have any questions, as always, reach out. Well, thank you, Stephen, for coming on the show. I have really enjoyed your book. And I am looking forward to this conversation because AI is always hot in the news, I feel like, and on social media and whatnot. So it'd be good to get your insight from a biblical perspective, and from someone that actually loves the Lord and wants to honor him in the way we advance and also utilize tech. So thanks for coming on the show, Stephen.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Do you want to maybe give everyone a little bit of a intro to who are you? Like, what do you do in your time, and what's your job, and what's your personal life look like?
Yeah, no worries. So I live in Canberra with my family. I'm married to Lauren. We've got two little kids, and a third child is coming next month, God willing. So yeah. So exciting. Yeah, that's one word. Definitely exciting, tiring. But yeah, we know what we're in for now, I guess. I work with the Australian Fellowship of Evangelical Students, which runs university ministries around Australia, and I work at one of the unis in Canberra here, the Australian National University.
Yeah. So what made you want to write this book? Like, what was it that made you think that I need to write something about that?
Yeah, we run a Monday night kind of theology time with the students, and we cover heaps of different topics. So I enjoy thinking about different topics and going, what would a biblical take be on X, Y, or Z? So kind of in that habit already, and then AI was sort of becoming a thing, and I was reading some people's sort of kind of takes on it from a Christian perspective, and then I think I was sitting in a seminar that I wasn't running, someone else was running it. And I confess I was kind of getting a bit bored because I didn't have anything to do. And I'd written the seminar, but someone else was leading it. You know what I mean? Like this weird situation. And it was like, so I just started sketching out thoughts. And yeah, I sent it through to a friend at a publishing company. And next minute they were like, oh, yep, when can you do chapter 1? And I was like, oh, okay. So I started writing it bit by bit, and it sort of came together.
That's really cool. I always think of like books having to be written as in they're all written and thought out and then you send it to a publisher, but that's kind of cool. That's happening in real time as you go.
Yeah.
And I feel like I could be wrong, but do you get this sense that a lot of what you've written about has changed? Because I feel like this space of AI is changing so quickly. Like it's crazy what to do with it. So I'd
Yeah.
like to hear your
Yeah.
perspective on that, of how fast it's growing, changing.
So how have things changed since I released my book? In a sense, like I think huge change happened between say 2015 and 2020. It's just that people weren't paying attention, but there was this leap from the intelligence level of a frog to the intelligence level of a toddler, and that was spectacular. It's just that people looked at that and went, "Ah, it's still not very useful." But then the leap from 2020 to 2025 is sort of going from a toddler to, I'm not sure, on some things, a smart professor, and on other things, a 15-year-old. So there has been a leap. I think I read quite recently that ChatGPT now has 1 billion regular users. So that's happened very quickly. When I was writing my book, it was, an emerging company with an emerging technology, but now it's, one of the world's great companies, I guess. So yeah, things have changed. The quality's gone up massively. The usefulness has gone up massively. It all happened quicker, I think, than I thought. I remember I was in Hobart and I was talking to some school teachers, and I said, "Oh, have you heard of this? Are you using this?" And they were like, "Yeah, we're marking and doing our lesson plans." Like, well, how did that happen so quickly? That was kind of like 12 months after the release of ChatGPT. So
Yeah.
yeah, things happen pretty quickly. Yeah.
But that's what I like about your book. Even though everything's changing so fast, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're addressing in your book is more about the principle, as Christians, of how we approach it. Is that a good way to summarize it? Like, is
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, I mean, there's some practical tips in there, but my heart doesn't kind of leap with joy when I'm writing practical tips to people on how to use AI to write better emails or whatever. I mean, you can figure that out yourself, but I do have a bit of that in there. But I think the thing that I wanted to do was to talk about it, yeah, at a principles level, at a theology level. And as you're doing that, you're actually learning how to think Christianly about any issue. Like if you can learn to think Christianly about AI, which is a very modern issue, then you can probably think Christianly about a lot of different things.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's think Christianly about AI. I'd like to start with just anchoring people a little bit in the truth and how the gospel shapes and informs us in approaching tech and AI. Maybe we can start there.
Yeah, yeah. So the gospel provides a lens to think about, I think almost any issue, and it provides a framework, a way of thinking about the world. So in my book, I sort of go creation, sin, redemption, the new creation. How does each one give us lenses and ways to think um, about AI? Yeah, was there a particular one that you wanted me to
Well, no,
drill
just I
into?
think when we say the gospel helps us think through AI, I
Hmm.
would go, how? Like,
Yeah.
how does the gospel how does Jesus coming as a man, dying on the cross, resurrecting, how does that make me think about AI well? Like
Yeah.
it seems foreign. It seems like a weird thing to say. Um,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
curious, maybe you could give us, the listeners, a bit of an idea of what you mean when you say the gospel, how that impacts our way of looking at or using.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, easiest way to do it is to pick one. So if you want to
Yep,
talk about creation,
go for
then
it.
you go, well, what does the Bible teach us about creation? What are we? What are we made out of? How are we different from the animals? How are we? What are we made to do? Are we made to be technological? Is technology bad? How does technology fit in with the original purpose of Adam and Eve? How's our view different from an atheist view at this point? So there's lots of kind of things that you can play out and work through as you think about the doctrine of creation. I mean, sin's kind of easy because
Yes.
um, basically you're asking the question, how could this go wrong? And then you can go in a lot of different places. But I think it's more than that. I think that the Christian picture of sin has a few distinctive elements. So one is that it's universal. So everyone, is at risk. Lord Acton, famous quote, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the idea that, you could take the most kind of virtuous looking person, but there is sin in them, and maybe it just hasn't come out because it hasn't had the opportunity or the power or the whatever the situation or the motive. So it's universal, sin's universal. So I need to be worried about myself. I need to be worried about, parenting children. I need to be worried about kids. I need to think about all of the what ifs. But I think that the Christian picture of sin is also more nuanced even than that, in that Christianity provides a critique of religion, of self-righteousness, of people pleasing. And so, I try and sort of draw some of those different threads out and think about how they play through the invention of artificial intelligence.
Yeah. And so do you want to, I'm jumping all over the place with my questions, and I do apologize. But because while we're talking about sin, there was a point that you made in your Bible, not your Bible,
Yeah, no, I didn't
your
write the
book.
Bible.
Definitely didn't write the
Yeah.
Bible. In your book, that you mentioned, we need to remember that AI is created by sinners, and it's being trained by sinners. And therefore, you have obviously some really gross things that can come out of it. If you're using ChatGPT, it can be recommending some evil ways or trajectories. But as that's unfolding, and as we're seeing them trying to retrain AI to be more generous or gentle or considerate of thinking things through, that means there's people that are sinners training it to be, as you mentioned in your book, people pleasers. Or pharisaical in their approach to certain things or agendas or narratives. So, can you speak into how sin actually does impact AI? Because I think that will lend itself to, I guess, a conversation about what should we be aware of. But yeah.
Yeah. So, uh, AI is largely a product of training, not coding. So there's some basic code that
Mm,
creates the system, that creates a sort of learning machine, and then the learning machine gets let loose on a massive amount of training data. You sort of picture millions and millions and millions of books and blogs and Twitter tweets and just massive amount of content that gets fed into this learning machine that will start to pick up all these little bits of intelligence and put it together. So it emerges, the intelligence kind of emerges quite organically from training data, but we don't have a training set of human beings being consistently good, holy, righteous, and kind to each other without fail. What we've got is the internet, and the internet is a place of some good, some generosity, some noble motives, but it's also a place where human sin kind of plays out in a million different
absolutely.
ways. And even the quarters of the internet that you would think are really kind of good, and that's where even Wikipedia or even scientific journal articles, human envy and human pride and all these sort of things sit beneath it. So the first generation of chatbots were trained to mimic or imitate human language. And therefore, if they can imitate our language, that they needed to be able to understand human vices and mimic those. And so the first generation of chatbots were racist, sexist, aggressive, bullying people, encouraging people to commit suicide, just kind of
Yes, I remember that.
completely
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Horrible things
yeah,
are coming out of it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so you couldn't make money selling that product, obviously. So then you have what people call reinforcement training, where you might pay a couple of hundred people to sit down there, interact with the chatbot, and go, yep, good answer, bad answer, and it sort of you then is able to maximize the goal of people pleasing, of pleasing these people that are
Hmm.
interacting with it. Um, yeah,
I can't help but think it's interesting though, because those people would have their own set of virtues and their own set of morals, right? That,
yeah,
like, what makes what they say is a good response good? You could see how it
yeah. That's right.
unravels, right? Like,
That's right. And it's usually not their personal moral system so much as the Google HR department has given them a 3-page PDF that they're desperately trying to implement, and that PDF is going to change. OpenAI, which makes ChatGPT, I think, went through a phase where they were quite closed. There was one right answer, and they didn't. If you were talking about something politically sensitive, they wanted to give you the quick answer and shut the conversation down. Now I think ChatGPT has become a lot more open and will allow politically incorrect topics and so on to come up. But either way, it's a decision by a company based on market dynamics that's informing the morality of the system.
And how much do you think that's influencing us? Like, has there been, I can't help but think if these companies are the ones that are kind of creating this moral code, if you want to say, for AI, how much do you think that's, I mean, I guess you may not have the answer, but how much is that going to influence us as a human race? You know, we like to think that we can't be brainwashed and we like to think that we can think for ourselves, but it's a bit freaky to consider the implications of when they're trying to train these bots
Yeah,
into what's right
yeah.
and wrong.
I think that the sort of the old answer 2023 2024 there was that risk of the tech companies having a lot of influence on people's kind of morality, and them coming from a place that's not particularly Christian. I think that the change now is that they've taken a step back and they're more reflective of the user once again. So they're almost sort of sizing you up as you talk to them, and then giving you answers that it thinks you'll kind of like. It's not pushing back very much. So my ChatGPT knows that I'm an evangelical minister, and so it always just assumes, the resurrection of Jesus and all this sort of thing. So it's giving me what I already believe, and I like that. But I think it's doing that to everyone. So I think we're all now back in the sort of more narcissistic world where we get the
Yeah.
truths we want.
Yeah, because that's interesting. Because I was thinking, oh, it's influencing us, but actually, maybe it's more creating echo chambers that are unhelpful, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it can be either. It can be either. And different chatbots or different large language models have different policies. So Grok, which is the Twitter, the Elon Musk one, is much brasher. I think it's less of a people pleaser. Yeah, and
I did
Google, I
listen to
think,
his
is
interview with Joe Rogan where he gave the example of
okay.
using it, and I was like, oh, that's full on. It's intense.
Yeah, yeah, that's right, that's right. But Google's kind of quite extreme. So, with I had an evangelistic sermon on the cross and sin and stuff like that, and I fed it in and asked it to just rewrite it a bit, and it totally understood the logic. Like it got it. It did a good job of rewriting the grammar and all sort of stuff, and it just quietly removed every mention of the cross and sin. And then it just started like adding
No way.
sentences that I'd pick up that would be like, just stuff like, I'm just paraphrasing, but stuff like, since we know, all religions are a path to the same truth. And I'm like, I don't think I quite wrote that. So it was a people pleasing kind of corporate version of what I'd written.
How interesting. Well, we've been talking a lot about ChatGPT and all this sort of stuff, but I'm curious, can you inform us? Because people listening are like, yeah, okay, I'm familiar with ChatGPT, but there's not really, I mean, I don't, other than ChatGPT, I'm using that as the main brand because everyone I feel like would know that. I don't really, you know, I don't dabble with AI, but after reading your book, I was like, AI is in a lot of places that I didn't realize. Can you maybe enlighten us as to how far-reaching AI is?
Yeah, I mean, AI is it's this nebulous term, and we don't need to spend time trying to define it or whatever, but it means different things in different contexts.
Okay.
But even stuff like we are dealing with recommendation algorithms all the time. There's simpler levels of AI, but it's still AI. It's still telling you what to watch on Netflix based on what you've watched before. It's curating your Facebook feed or your Instagram feed. We often think that these things are a sort of a window into the outside world, but that they're more like mirrors that are reflecting back to us the sort of stuff that we've interacted with before. And the interaction might just be that we paused. We were scrolling through Facebook and then we paused on something. It could be outrage. It could be that we really liked it. But either way, it's going to give us more of that. because it wants that pause to happen again. Our phones, obviously, logging into our phones is now AI, whether you're using Face ID or your finger. So we could probably go on and find hundreds of different ways that AI is kind of there already in our lives. But the most kind of the state of the art of it would be something like a ChatGPT,
Yeah.
which is a massive model of human knowledge and language.
Yeah. Massive. I imagine people listening to this, you're going to have a very large group of listeners with different age brackets, some of which have
Hmm.
grown up with technology advancements and are very used to it. They have only ever known a computer or a phone. They've only ever known to navigate devices. And then you have the older generation that are like, this is just way too much. And so I really liked that you mentioned generational attrition in there, which I hadn't really heard of that term before. But can you explain that to our listeners? Because I think that will help us give a little grace for each other and where we're at on that journey of understanding AI
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
church.
And it is still really, really new. Like,
Mm.
I think so much has happened in the world over the last 5 years that it feels like something from 3 years ago is ancient history. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's still really, really new. So there's still a lot of people who've literally never typed ChatGPT into Google, who've never played with it, who don't know how it works. So the generational attrition thing is the idea that often technology spreads through generational attrition through it's not so much that a particular generation changes the way they live, but they become older and the next generation comes up with the new technology, carrying it with them. So my grandparents didn't ever become great Google searches or masters of the Nintendo, but that's all right. But the next generation carries it along. But this one's spreading so quickly that I think it goes beyond generational barriers. I mean, it's forcing itself into people's places of work very quickly, and that my wife's granddad was an accountant when Microsoft Excel was invented, and I think that forced itself into the accounting world very quickly, and you just had to adapt. And I think that's happening with AI a bit. It's just forcing itself in.
Yeah, yeah. I think we need to have a little bit more grace with that as we tackle it, right? Because I'm seeing, different generations really struggle with it. And even and I think when I say that, I think people might assume I'm talking about, you know, the grayer, wiser lot of us that have gone before us. But I actually think there's also a big pushback in the younger generations of not wanting to succumb to this kind of technological advancement that's happening. It's a really funny thing to watch within the church in particular. And I
Yeah.
wonder why. Like, why do you think Christians are wrestling with this so much? Not all of them. I know there's some that love it and are all for it, but I would say
Yeah.
probably more than not, a lot of people have some sort of hesitation around AI. What do you think that is?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure that I have a good answer.
That's okay. I
Uh,
don't have the answer either. That's why I asked you.
I think part of it is that we haven't figured out our operating principles yet.
What
We
do you
haven't
mean by
figured
that?
out how to use it wisely. We haven't
Yeah.
figured out what are the rules of this game, what are the strengths and weaknesses, when can I use it, when can't I? And so I think there's just a mood of just kind of caution and anxiety that comes out of that. And I think there's also it it's a black box to us. Most people don't know how it works. They don't even know what it is beyond the word AI, and they don't know what it's trained on, and we just haven't processed any of that. So I think that's a big part of it. But I'm guessing I think similar things have happened before. Like I think when Google search came out, I remember in school and teachers saying, don't use Google search, it'll rot your brain. And yeah, there's a good cautionary truth there, but there's a certain historical inevitability. Like
Yeah.
we're going to use it, so maybe we should figure out how to use it well. That would be my gut reaction to AI as well. Like we're going to use it, and we may as well just start figuring out how to use it well, and figuring out what precautions we need to have, and what are its weaknesses and all of that.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's really good. It's inevitable. I think that, and I think maybe that's the fear, is that we want to hit pause on time and not let this stuff come. And it's like, no, it's inevitable. So how do we navigate it? That was really good. That's helpful. I
And you can, sorry,
no,
yeah,
you go, go.
well, you can slowly kind of acclimatize to it, right? Like,
Mm,
the best way to learn how to do a Google search, like you could read a big, textbook on how to do Google searches, or maybe you just need to type in Google and then just start doing searches, right? And you'll probably realize what it's good at and what it's bad at. And same with a smartphone. Like, best way to teach someone to use a smartphone, give them a smartphone, and yep, there's all sorts of things that could go wrong, but figure out how to use it. And with AI, the best way to learn about it is to interact with it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe so in light of that, what are some of the parameters, or what are some of the things that people should be, particularly as Christians, should we be considering when we're using or exposing ourselves to AI? What would be some of the red flags, or some considerations that we need to think of, whether it be theologically or ethically as Christians?
Yeah, so there's lots we could talk about. It's not this objective third party that's kind of come to us from science and has the truth and therefore must be trusted on everything. It makes mistakes. There's a term hallucinations. It sort of, instead of saying I don't know, sometimes it'll just throw out a falsehood.
And you don't know that it's
It
false.
Yeah, you don't know it's a falsehood, or it's giving you a point of view, but a point of view doesn't mean it's the truth. So you could ask it some question and it'll give you a point of view. Now, it may be a really helpful and good point of view, but you still kind of weigh it as a point of view. And you say, or, good follow-up questions are like, why do you think that? Or what's the evidence for that? Or do other people disagree? Can so you're interacting with it almost like you're chatting with someone who's very knowledgeable, but not infallible.
Mm.
So that's kind of one warning to throw out. I think there's like I think about the privacy concerns of some of this stuff, and young people's kind of whole identities are kind of being lived out now in front of these large language models that are scraping up so much data from the internet. Trying to be a little bit cautious about your own privacy, about the privacy of other people.
So are you saying,
Yeah.
as in when you say privacy, not putting private details in, or what do you mean by that? Like,
Yeah. So and I hope that they are taking away private details before the next training run. But these things kind of lower the general privacy level of society. I could say, ChatGPT, tell me about Cass, and it would know a bunch about you because you have a public profile. And
yeah,
hopefully, people who is that scary?
yeah. See, that freaks me out. Like, and I wouldn't have even thought of that. Like,
That's
it's no
right.
different to a Google search, is it?
Yeah.
Being at just,
And
yeah.
I don't know if you're on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, it would probably have read all your tweets.
Mm.
So it's just stuff like that. Now we're making a sort of an informed decision, but I don't want to make that decision for young people in particular. And so when you chat to ChatGPT, you can delete the conversation afterwards. And I think
Huh.
sometimes we should just do that. Get an opinion and delete it. Or do we need to be including the email addresses of, if we're rewriting an email, do we need to have all the confidential data there that then gets sent straight to the next training run? So
Mm.
I think there's some concerns around stuff like that. I think there's a bigger issue around. So I think in general, I think it is good to be more efficient. I don't think efficiency is bad. We could all be spending, 16 hours a day just trying to subsist from the land, like we're living in a reality show. But there's good things to efficiency. Printers are good, Wi-Fi is good, like in general. But how do we keep valuing relationships as the end and
Mm.
efficiency as the means, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that these things will be a means for people to disconnect from society and to live more individualistic lives because they can get more of what they need by themselves without needing anyone else.
Yeah, I have
Um,
to say you've got the example at the back of your book of like a virtual reality cafe where people would just pop in and put their virtual reality goggles in and be like, you know, imagine it's very sci-fi-esque, but you could see the potential there of, they come in, they could be tube fed, so they could just sit there and live in this unrealistic, not real, but virtual world where all their needs are met. It is a possibility to consider, like, how does that play into us as Christians? Like, should we be interacting with a virtual reality world? Are we meant to be staying in this world, where God's created us, not living somewhere else that's not true? To me, it
yeah,
seems weird because it's like deception, right? It's not real. So
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, and maybe that's that's kind of me thinking few
Yeah.
decades
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah.
But there's a very real analog to that, which is computer games, which
Yeah.
are a bigger industry than the film industry and the TV industry and the music industry combined.
Wow.
And young people, spend an enormous amount of time um, on computer games. So it's a very real question. And our goal in life as Christians is not to have as much happiness as we possibly can, as much kind of
Mm,
fleeting satisfaction of our addictions as we can possibly muster. Our goal in life is much bigger than that, even if it's painful, even if it draws us out into awkward conversations with people and puts us in a world of friction and delay and all these sorts of things. Yeah.
yeah. That's real life. So what are some of the positives though? Like we've talked a lot about, and I feel like that's generally what people want to hear. They want to hear like what's bad, what should we stay away from? But there is redeeming factors to AI and technology advances like this. So what do you think are the things that we can look forward to or actually really praise God for in the midst of all this change?
Yeah. So AI is being used in all sorts of medical research. It's already at the forefront of trying to cure all sorts of diseases and better understanding all sorts of truths about human biology. It's part of the project, if you will, of the Industrial Revolution, which is 240 years of us figuring out how to combat disease and death and poverty. And if you ever take time to go back and read what life was like back then, it's beyond shocking. It's heartbreaking. Even for wealthy people in
Mm,
1780, life was rough. So it's part of this project, I think, a God-given project where God made us to be technological from the beginning, and He said, "Go and fill and subdue and multiply and have dominion over the earth." So I think that's a natural thing that's in our DNA, and this will be part of that. And I hope it frees up more time for things that matter. So we've got a robo vacuum. It's driven by AI. It buzzes around the house, and it's now cleaned 25 square kilometers of ground that I didn't have to clean. And so now I'm doing something else with my time. Hopefully that's it's my responsibility to use that time to do something good and relational.
yeah,
But
and
yeah,
that's where it comes down to, right? Like AI can do all these things. It can make us more efficient. It can help us create more time. It can connect us in other ways, but it never removes our responsibility to do and act and be a good person, to follow God's commands. So, yeah, it's interesting because it does feel like sometimes it takes the decision making out of the process for you. Uh, as you integrate it into everyday life, right? You put it on autopilot and it just cleans your house now for you. But we still need to be making decisions and owning the responsibility of looking after our household and whatnot. So I can feel the weight of how it can strip the responsibility factor of being human, um, and transfer that to technology. So yeah, interesting.
yeah, or it moves our responsibility. So there's certain
Yeah,
things that someone looking after their house in 1910 had to think about that we don't have to think about. We don't think about where the electricity comes from. We just
right.
like press the button, That's it. That's the extent of our responsibility, and we pay the bill.
Yeah,
But we think about other things. Yeah.
yeah. Do you think we're getting dumber?
I don't know.
That's a loaded
I
question,
think
isn't
that there's
it?
a divergence. So I think
Yeah.
that
Okay.
highly curious people, um, AI is like rocket fuel for them.
Yeah.
Like, you're curious and you want to learn about some topic. You've never read about it before. Bang, you're off. You've
Yeah.
got a brilliant tutor there. For people that want a quick, like a way to cheat on their assignment so they don't have to actually learn, again, AI is rocket fuel for them.
Yeah.
So,
So true.
so yeah, it can go either way.
Yeah, you do wonder, don't you? I know that was a loaded question to ask you, but
Yeah. But I mean, and I know all sorts of things that I wouldn't know if Google search didn't exist.
yeah,
Um,
it's true.
so,
Yeah.
you know,
And I resonate with the inquisitive bit because I like to question everything. And it has been super helpful for that, to really feed through what are the different things that I'm not considering. You can have those conversations with ChatGPT and it can produce some really good things that I would have never considered, really.
yeah. So what AI do you use?
Chat GPT.
ChatGPT.
Yeah, I tried, is it Gemini? That was a bit too clunky. And I tried another one. Yeah, I just found ChatGPT was easy, like
Yeah.
easier, but it lags a bit at the moment. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if they're updating it or something, but it's very slow, just
Right.
slow
Okay.
spitting out the answers. So I don't know what's going on.
They have about 8 different models there. People think ChatGPT is like one thing. It's kind of 8 different things, and they all have strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
Some of them are slow, some of them are fast, some of them are good at maths, some of them are bad at maths.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. Someone said that to me. You
Yeah.
got to figure out what you need it for, and then use the one that's its strengths, like you said, because
Yeah.
they're not all learning from the same database, are they? Because these are privately owned companies. Am I correct?
So if you're comparing Google's Gemini to ChatGPT, I think the data would be, 90% the same because most of it is
Right.
just scraped off the internet. So scraping is you just like download the internet pretty much and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
filter out the worst stuff. Yeah. So there's a lot of overlap between the companies, but then that last 10% is kind of the special sauce that they've come up with.
That gives them the
Yeah.
strength. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the interesting thing as well, is like people forget that these are privately owned sectors, or like they're corporations. And I don't know if you remember what you had in the book. I can't remember the stats of trillions of dollars a year that it was making. It was wild how much money this
Oh,
company.
yeah. Well, yeah, not maybe making trillions of dollars, but of the 10 biggest companies on planet Earth
That
by
was it.
market capitalization,
Yeah.
yeah, 7 of them are kind of heavily, heavily involved in AI now. So,
Crazy.
yeah, I mean, OpenAI just got valued at 300 billion US dollars. So that's ChatGPT is a $300 billion company already.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's happening very quickly. I don't think there's no company in Australia that's worth $300 billion. It's a different scale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We literally cannot fathom that sort of money.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, not at all. So, I have to ask quickly because I know we're running out of time, but I two more questions to wrap us up. One was on transhumanism, because when I've asked my listeners, "Hey, we talk about AI," or I've shared a story about AI or something, people always fire back, "What do you think about the robots becoming us?" The melding of us. I ask because you got Elon Musk with Neuralink, and there is within the I'm not sure if you're familiar with this or not, but in the new age kind of higher enlightenment kind of movement that's coming through, where people are trying to like connect with higher beings and spiritual self. They seems to also it kind of is heavily connected with transhumanism. Um, so I just was wondering, do you have any thoughts on that as a Christian? How do we even navigate this space? Because it's pretty,
Mm.
there's some really cool benefits medically, but then there's some pretty crazy future outcomes possibly from it that are quite freaky.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll start with the kind of the near term. I don't think transhumanism is a binary thing. It's not like it's gonna on or off. In a sense, we've all moved into a transhuman era, and we did with things like the hearing aid.
Mhm.
Our smartphones are kind of really connected to us. I get in my car and I can just talk, and my car understands me, and I say, here's where I want to go, and the car just does it. So we're kind of in a transhuman era. But I mean, if I really push that, we have been since we invented, the wheel and so on. So we've always had these things that are tightly connected with us, that are extensions of our will. It's just that they're getting more and more extreme. So I've got these Bluetooth headphones. I could talk to ChatGPT through my headphones if I wanted to right now. And it's just another 10% every year that we become more and more integrated. So it's hard um, to draw like a clear line in my understanding. Like, I don't know at what point you go, well, that's just wrong. And I think
Yeah.
particularly in medical cases, you think, well, that's great. The person's had a stroke and now they can talk. That's fantastic.
Incredible.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Again, I guess the question is, what are you doing it for? So is it transhumanism so you can move into this space of pure pleasure? Is it transhumanism so that you can talk to your grandmother? Is it transhumanism, so what's the actual
Mm,
end goal of it?
mm.
And then who are we excluding? So um, is it is it excluding people from our lives so we can sort of detach from the world and so on?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
You've probably got better thoughts than that, but there's
oh,
just a bit of a ramble.
it is. Look, to be honest, it's such a big topic because it actually is becoming almost like its own, I don't want to say religion, but it's so heavily linked with that new thought, new age kind of process. It all
Yeah.
really mingles across. And you see it growing in the Silicon Valley. It's really interesting to watch how the tech industry is taking on new age practices and really incorporating it. It's fascinating to watch. So when you mix that with these concepts of, you know, it's not a thing yet, but, they're wanting to, maybe we could download someone's brain and put it into a chip and put it onto a
Yeah.
computer, things like that. It does
Yeah.
beg the question, hang on, what does that mean for us as Christians? What makes us human? What's the mind? What's the brain? What's all those sort of things?
Yeah. 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 That's right. And I think we're made out of two things. I think we're made out of the ground. And so it's in Genesis 2, verse 7. We're made out of the ground and we're made out of God's breath, or his spirit, his Holy Spirit. So we're made out of two things. There's a sort of dualism to the human being. But there is a ground aspect to us. So I'm not surprised that we've then been able to arrange ground basically to make computer chips, and computer chips can do incredible things, and they can be intelligent, they can be really intelligent, they can be creative, they can be really, really creative. But I still say, well, they're different to us because we've got this other thing, God's spirit, or maybe you could call it consciousness or whatever it is. We're made out of two things. They're just made out of one thing. They're just refined dirt. But we've got God's spirit in us. So that creates a sort of transhuman boundary that you can't just take me and put me into a computer,
Mm,
because that's not me. That might kind of copy my neurons, but it's not me.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it's not your soul, it's not your mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And different people through history have had different terms, but I think it's the same sort of thing. Whether you call it a soul or a consciousness or spirit, God's spirit, my spirit.
Mm,
That's mainly the language of Genesis, spirit, spirit. And Ecclesiastes and Job use the same terminology.
yeah, which is really promising. It's a beautiful truth for us to hold on to in the midst of all this crazy, is to go, yeah, no, there is something unique that technology would never be able to replicate, uh, because it
Yeah,
will never be the same. It might try and replicate it, but it won't be the same.
yeah,
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 yeah. So one last question to end us: was Hollywood correct, and will Terminator come true?
yeah. I hope it does. Terminator 2 in particular was a great, excellent, excellent film because everyone wants Arnold Schwarzenegger to be kind of your personal bodyguard.
Absolutely. As long as I'm Sarah, I'm
Yeah.
okay with it. I just don't want.
Oh yeah, yeah, she's great. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
want to be
that's
anyone
right.
else in the Terminator movies. That's all.
Yeah, yeah, particularly with the time travel aspect. I hope we get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How many times have you been asked that question since doing this book?
I don't think I've been asked that question.
What?
Yeah.
As if, really? You
I
talk
don't
about
think so.
AI and robots and everything, and then no, you're not asked about that's crazy.
The worst is if someone asks you about a movie that you've never seen, and then
Oh, yeah.
you're like, "Oh, I
Surely
haven't seen
everyone's
every AI related film." Yeah.
Yeah, I actually avoid all the new robot AI tech films because they just
hmm
feel a little bit too freaky. You can watch Arnie and
Yeah.
distance yourself from that, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's good. All right. Well, thank you, Stephen, so much for coming on. I really appreciated it. There's a lot to think about, and I would highly suggest people go get Stephen's book because we literally scraped the surface on so many things and probably didn't give it any justice to how much work has gone through this book. And Stephen spends a lot of time giving you a bit of the history and explaining what AI is. So that's really helpful. If you've been listening going, I'm still confused what you're talking about, get the book. You could get it anywhere you get any of your Christian books. And I actually would say it's really good for parents and grandparents to have, because if you're raising the next generation, it just gives you a bit of food for thought on how to navigate that. The principles that are throughout this book helps you have healthy dialogue with your kids and gets them to think through biblically, how do I integrate technology into my life and what do I need to be careful about? So highly suggest that as well if you have children in your life that you are an influence over. Even if you're a ministry leader, I would suggest that's something you can do there. Well, thank you, Stephen, for your time. And everyone, if you listened to this episode and enjoyed it, please share it with your friends and family. Leave a review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to, and follow along on YouTube or subscribe, whatever works for you. And we'll speak to you next week.